everyone. I am Renyal T. Acabo.
And I am Kenneth Carlo H. Alberio.
We're going to discuss the entire lesson of Chapter 7. So, Chapter 7 is all about multinational corporations in developing countries.
Bringers of working standards for modern slaveholders.
So, good day everyone. In today's video, we'll talk about Lesson 7. So, Lesson 7 is all about multinational corporations in developing countries. Are they bringers of working standards or modern slaveholders? But before that, we will talk first what is multinational corporation.
Multinational corporation, a company that has business operations in at least one country other than its home country.
So, multinational corporations are regarded as agents of change and are able to generate economic and social benefits for the local population, especially through the provision of employment. On the other hand, however, the employment provided is often considered to be a modern form of slavery due to poor working conditions and below living wages. So, multinational corporations are corporations or large corporations that owns or controls production of goods or sales in more than one country, including their home country.
They import and export goods and services from different countries. They also buy and sell licenses in foreign markets. Engaging in contract manufacturing, permitting a local manufacturer in a foreign country to produce their products.
So, some examples of multinational corporations are iPhone, Starbucks, McDonald's, Nestle, and many more corporations all over the world. Now, let's go to multinational corporations and working standards. So, as with any standards, the interpretation of working standards varies widely, especially when the standard is voluntary in nature or when it only provides broad principles. Moreover, as briefly pointed out, a lacking enforcement of legally binding standards will also influence the seriousness with which the standard is approached.
Finally, the question of the obligation of the extent of implementation arises. A multinational corporation is only responsible for adhering to standards within its organization, or does it have an obligation to promote or even enforce standards in its supply chain?
Now, let's go to approaches to interpreting working standards. Due to globalization, the entrance in foreign markets has become a frequent scenario for many companies that operate on international level and invest abroad. So, in the case of developing countries, where standards are usually lower in the home countries of existing multinational corporations.
And adopt the approach of cultural relativism, which means that due to cultural differences, it simply adopts local rules and norms of behavior. On the other side, it can apply the standard of its home country and treat it as universally applicable standard in the sense of absolutist approach. This approach assumes that one single set of standards should universally determine ethical behavior, independently on the location, the people, or the situations. This standard for all approach might, however, also be regarded as ethical imperialism, since the multinational companies assumes that its standards are applicable everywhere with no regard to specific cultural characteristics. However, as initially indicated, this argument is based on economic theory, and theory is always based on a set of assumptions that need to hold for a certain expected outcome. Whereas, for developed countries, the theory might be mostly applicable. For developing countries, it is not, because the preconditions to assume the existence of a perfect market do not hold at all. Workers are confronted with information symmetries that limit their choices, often to either badly paid work or no work at all. Examples reveal the significant market failures in developing countries exist, and perfect market conditions cannot be assumed. Market failure, in turn, can be seen to justify the promotion of working standards that are based on generally accepted human rights.
Now, let's go to the impact of socio-economic environments and investment motives on working standards. Labor migration because of different working conditions has a long story or history. Already in the 18th and 19th century, there was widespread immigration from Europe which had labor in abundance to the United Nations.
Despite the underlying economic logic, such movements also depend on the political frameworks of the countries concerned that have allowed the immigration and immigration respectively. Labor mobility and inevitability is a product of economic and political conditions.
So, as pointed out, the central motivations for business is to profit from reduced labor costs. In the market economies of industrialized countries, labor costs are comparatively high due to competition for employees, but also due to legal frameworks that set minimum wages or allow for collective bargaining. In developing countries, these preconditions are hardly found. There is neither a strong competition for low-skilled labor since it is available in abundance, nor is the labor side organized in a way that would allow for efficient collective bargaining. Finally, the civil society and the media are underdeveloped in the world's countries, so that there is only little pressure. Think civic organizations of journalists to force multinational corporations into an adoption of higher standards. Now, let's go to the influence of entry modes on working standards. For a long time, the extent of ownership was regarded as the major determinant for whether and how for multinational companies were seen to be responsible for setting working standards. The differentiation between a company trading with a developing country as a low level of internationalization and one that owns a firm there as a high level is well justified for the simple reason that in the latter case, the company acts are employer and thus a legal responsibility for the local people employed.
According to Clean 2010, the further analysis of trade relationships between multinational corporations and local enterprises situated in developing countries revealed a great dependency of the latter of the former. Furthermore, multinational corporations were already exercising a certain scope of pressure and control with regard to the product quality they were demanding.
However, the role of companies that are only trade partners, especially multinational corporations, as large buyers, in enforcing the implementation of working standards in developing countries is not being underestimated. They can use their market power for putting pressure on the suppliers in the developing countries to improve conditions by making acceptable condition a prerequisite for doing business.
Now let's move on to the existing working standard. Working standards are mostly designed to empower a minimum level of ethically working environment.
Many are developed in an international multilateral process in order to create a globally acceptability. The principles are designed in a manner so that they can be applied by companies of all industries and size, even non-profit organizations such as an NGOs or universities.
Major coming or current standards. Major deficit of the current system of internationally developed codes are lack of enforcement through the legislations, control, and last is punishment mechanism. Now, typical working standards involve the wage level equal pay between men, women, child labor issues, forced labor, labor trafficking, and extensive overtime. Unaddressed work-related problems. Number 1, assumptions. Number 2, shortfall. Number 3 is conflict or relative development. And the last topic is the impact of multinational companies, working conditions, and empirical perspective.
It leads to the continuation of poor or even worsening standards. It remains open whether are bringers of change, in the positive sense, or modern slaveholders. Now, multinational companies can directly exert pressure on the host countries government to develop, implement, and enforce regulations to promote labor standards.
Now, in conclusion, labor standard means the complex undertaking which is influenced by many factors.
Number 1. Socio-economic environment. 2. Investment motives. Number 3. Entry modes. Number 4. Goal. Number 5. Possibilities of the actors involved. Number 6. Multinational companies. Number 7. Home and host countries, governments. Number 8. International associations. Number 9. NGOs. And number 10. Workers themselves.
The implementation of working standards that improves working conditions can lead to a win-win situation. Now, what is the meaning of individual employees? It can mean a protection from unfair labor practices, improves mental and physical conditions, and create a higher income. Now, what is societies? Societies, as a whole, it can improve socio-economic conditions and advance public issues such as income, health, as education.
So that's the end of our topic. Thank you for watching. Keep safe and God bless.